Ramesh, Chief Engineer from the Marine Engineering Department. Well, we had discussed yesterday about what a boiler is basically. I've given you a few hints about what a fire tube boiler is and what a water tube boiler is. So today we'll talk something in detail about what a boiler survey means. Actually, why do you think a boiler survey is needed? Basically, to see the entire operation of the boiler functioning satisfactorily without any issues. Because it is a pressure vessel, and well, you will have to make sure that the pressure vessel does not have any issues at all as regards safety. There should not be any compromise. So well, to start with, regular internal and external examination is needed for a boiler during a survey. And to start with, survey is done every 2-year intervals and until they are 8 years old. So for a new ship, I should say that the boiler can be surveyed every alternate year. Well, after 8 years, automatically the age of the boiler gets older and it's better that you survey it annually. So let's see with how the planning goes first. The discussion has to be done with the master and the chief engineer. Well, you'll have to see the time, whether it's confirmed or the available manpower, and what is the steam requirement from A to B, from which port you're traveling and which port you're reaching. Well, these are the proper plannings that you need to make before you start with the survey or the paperwork. What are the checks that you do before shutting down the boiler? Sufficient spares, for example, joints, packings, gauge glasses, all the basic things what you need to replace during a survey are to be checked. Normally on board the ship, the third engineer is the default man or the person in charge for the boiler. So the chief engineer normally dedicates this job to him and he reports back to his senior, who is the second engineer, to make sure that these parts are available, or if not, to procure them. Well, the reports, earlier reports, if it's a new ship, I'm sorry, you will not have any reports, but if it's quite an old ship, well, about 6 to 7 years old, you will have the by-year survey, that is every 2 yearly. Those all should be kept ready. The manual also should be kept in hand, which is very, very important. Then the most important is special tools. What are the special tools will come in line? Some special tools to name are the safety valve, the pop-up tool, or the masking tool, because the safety valve should not lift. So that is one tool which is very, very essential. And briefing with all the engineers. You should make sure that all the engineers are aware of what you're doing. We have a complement of chief, second, third, and sometimes fourth, and sometimes a junior. So these are the engine complement, and you have the crew as well. So with all of them, you'll have a proper meeting prior to starting the survey. Then make sure that all the valves, which are the valves and the mountings, what you're supposed to do during the survey, have to be marked, because it's not that blindly you open everything. Most likely you dismantle what is needed. Well, before shutting down the boiler, the first point goes like inform the chief engineer. Of course, he is the head of the department as regards engine. So you inform the chief engineer. Inform also the duty deck officer, who's supposed to be maybe the second officer or the chief officer. And then some things which you need to check inside the engine room are. Now, when the boiler is shutting down, you're making sure that the heating is not going to be there. Now, if there's no heating, then obviously you have to change over the fuel from heavy oil to diesel oil. So, because heavy oil needs heating, and if there's no heating, heavy oil is going to become very viscous. So, if the main engine, which is normally running on heavy oil, will have heavy oil inside or residual fuel oil, if the viscosity is very high, it's going to create a problem. So, you'll have to make sure that the fuel is changed over prior to shutting down the boiler. This is very, very important. So for doing that, you will have to make sure that the fuel is changed to diesel oil from heavy oil. Okay, so the diesel oil service tank also has to be topped up, and that is there inside the engine room. And then of course you'll have to do the changeover procedures, what are very needed or mandatory from carrying out changes from diesel fuel oil to heavy oil. And then the purifiers have to be stopped. Of course, the purifiers use steam for purification. They also need to be stopped. All the heating and all the tracing steam line valves has to be stopped. Meaning wherever the steam is going, you have to shut down all the valves. That's very important. Of course, before stopping the boiler, soot blowing is very, very essential. Now, what is soot blowing? Removing the soot or the carbon. That is what is called a soot blowing. Now, there are two ways of doing this. One is by using compressed air or by probably using steam. Well, next comes changing over to manual firing. Now, if you want to stop the boiler now, you'll have to change over from automatic to manual. So, normally it is in the auto mode where everything is taken care of, but it's better that you change over to manual, then stop the firing. Just press the red button and it stops firing. Well, then comes purging the boiler. What do you mean by purging again? Purging is ventilating the boiler. So ventilating means where are you going to ventilate? You're going to ventilate the furnace where the fire has taken place, So that's what is called as purging. So about 3 to 5 minutes you blow in air from the engine room, you throw out whatever combustibles are there within the furnace and you make sure that it is thoroughly purged. Then once there is no pressure, obviously shut off the main steam stop valve, switch off the power, put off the circuit breaker, remove the fuses, additional safety from the panel so that in case if accidentally somebody happens to turn on the power, even still the boiler doesn't start. Well, most important again, you'll have to put a notice on the circuit breaker and also inside the control room and on the bridge telling that there's a boiler survey in progress. Shut off all the fuel valves, atomizing valves, or all the necessary valves which are to be locked in position prior dismantling all the accessories or the mountings. Allow the boiler to cool down sufficiently. Then blowing down. Now, very important again, you will have to empty the boiler or remove the water from within the boiler. Now, that's called as blow down. There are two kinds of blow down. One is scum blow down, the other one is bottom blow down. Now, scum is also called as surface blow down, where you remove the kinds of sediments or impurities or floating debris or maybe even oil from the surface of the water which is there in the boiler. And the bottom blowdown is the one where you remove all the dissolved particles or the sediments or whatever salts which are there in the bottom. So this also has to be carried out. In this case, what we do is we do a total or a complete blowdown, since the entire water has to be removed from the boiler. Well, so you open the the bottom blowdown valve and you drain the boiler completely. Open the air vent. Now there's one more valve, it's called as an air vent valve. That is a mounting which is there on the steam drum right on the top. Now this also has to be opened. Main reason is to prevent any implosion. Now what is the meaning of implosion? That means as the water gets out of the boiler, well, automatically the water is going to go out and there should be something to replace the water which is going out. So the air from the outside comes into the steam drum to replace the water which is getting out of the boiler. Now if the vent is not opened, then you are going to have a very big problem, where means the boiler will try to implode. That is, it gets sucked inside. So that's also very dangerous. Well, next is again preparing further cooling down. You'll have to do more cooling down, of course. So you start preparing to open the manhole door. There are two normally manhole doors, one on the top and one on the kind of middle or the bottom. So make sure that the top manhole door is open first, and then you have to start ventilating it. For opening the manhole door, make sure that proper precautions are taken. The manhole door is properly lashed with a rope, and eye bolts are secured, and then the dogs are slackened slightly. Dogs are nothing but the clamping arrangements on the manhole door. And then make sure give a gentle tap on the manhole door so that the door doesn't fall down. Well, because if by any chance if the door happens to fall inside, it's going to become a big danger, or it's going to create a big issue. It's not going to be very easy for you to remove the door. So that's the main reason why you secure the door using a rope, so that you're able to take it out without any problem. Then once the level of the water is probably receded down to the top manhole, you can probably remove the top manhole. Then of course you keep a ventilating fan there and make sure that the ventilation is started. You keep continuing draining more and make sure that the bottom manhole door is also able to be removed. That means the level of the water should be receded below the level of the bottom manhole door. Once that is also made sure, you open the bottom manhole door and of course continue the ventilation. Now you will see that the top door and the bottom door both are open and air starts to circulate within the boiler, and it's not going to be normal air, it's going to be really hot air because the water is very, very hot. So for all this, now you may need a proper purging system, meaning ventilating system I should say. So normally we have two fans, one on the suction and one on the exhaust. So it is doing a good purpose of ventilating the fan in a shortest moment of time. Well, next comes to dismantle the furnace also. So the furnace happens to be an additional accessory or a mounting in the front of the boiler. That also has to be removed, or rather the bolts and nuts eased and taken out. And now the ventilation has to be done from the fire side as well. Now, most importantly, to go into the boiler is what demands. Now, you will have to make an enclosed space entry permit, which is very, very important. Now, if the person happens to go inside the boiler, he should not be able to go into the boiler without the permit. So what happens now, if you do not have a permit, it's a very big issue. let's get ready to make entry, rather preparation for entry. So the items that are needed to make sure for entry are a safety torch, which is very important, a hand lamp rather, and I would suggest that you have two hand lamps, not one, because I'm taken from two different sources, because in case one hand lamp happens to have an issue, the other hand lamp will still power the light and you will have availability of light. And it should be intrinsically safe, because there could be explosive gases inside, so make sure that the hand lamp is intrinsically safe and the lamp is not exposed. Investigate from outside by making sure that it is clear from obstruction before entering the boiler, of course. That's also very much needed, because there should not be any obstruction for a person to enter into the boiler. The manhole doors are normally oval, and it is quite difficult for a person on the fatter side to make entry into the door. So normally the choices are that whoever tries to make entry into the door happens to be little on the slimmer end. Well, the oxygen analyzer also is to be carried with the person who is supposed to be entering the boiler. And of course, most importantly, all the PPEs, the personal protective equipment, should also be worn. Name a few are what you call goggles, your boiler suits, disposable boiler suits, gloves, safety shoes. These are helmets. And again, you have to make sure that your pockets are clear of, they do not have any contents or any what you call keys or whatever be there in your pockets, because you accidentally try to bend in, and once these things fall from your pocket, there are lots of issues or damages are going to be caused. And of course, once the person makes entry, a responsible guy should be standing outside by the manhole door entrance to make sure or to understand what the person inside wants. So there should be proper communication between the person standing at the entrance of the door and the person going in. And of course, to be a standby, a BA set or a breathing apparatus set also should be kept ready at the outside. Okay, and communication, as I already told you, be in constant touch. And lighting, of course, make sure there is adequate lighting. Now these are the things which you are supposed to ensure prior to making entry. Now you will have to be making sure that before calling a surveyor, you will have to thoroughly clean the boiler, both the fire side as well as the water side. It may require a brushing down or a hosing down, so which has to be decided by the chief engineer on board. And then some scales may also be there which may have to be chipped off if at all needed in the water side. And if there are any traces of oil, not to mention if at all by any chance, then chemical means also has to be adopted to remove them. Now let's go to the route of inspection. Well, the gas side, what are the things which needed to be inspected are exterior of the drums, for signs of tube roll, leakage, corrosion, soot erosion, overheating, conditions of outside drums, insulations, inspect the drum support for cracks, inspect the pipes and the valves for leaks, check the blow-down connections, water wall tubes and fins for cracks, condition of the refractory, tubes near the soot blowers for steam impingement, soot blowers distortions, worn bearings, rubbing of the tubes, nozzles conditions. There are lots of things which you need to investigate once you start going in on the gas side. Now on the water side comes the steam drums for corrosion, scaling, pitting, erosion, manhole seats and surfaces, tubes again for corrosion, excess deposits, cracking, handhold doors, studs, condition of the feed lines. Well, coming to the safety valve, we'll have to check the condition of the valves. Of course, the safety valve also has to be dismantled thoroughly. You'll have to check the safety valve's internal conditions for signs of wear, pitting, cracks, resiliency, and the condition of the springs. A drop test is normally done for condition of checking of the springs. Check spindle for the straightness and adjusting the ring thread for the freedom of movement. Check the discharge and the drain piping. Check the dampers. Check the condition of the burners. So lots of things have to be checked on regards to safety valve. Now once everything is done, the surveyor gives a green signal. He has checked everything and what all necessary things has to be done. He will give a report to the chief engineer, and then it is time to box up the boiler now. So once the internal surfaces are all made sure that it's clear and clean, you will have to start boxing up all what you have removed. So the openings of the mountings are to be cleared properly, the mountings are to be fixed back, the manhole doors, whatever removed has to be replaced back. Now start taking water in the boiler very slowly using the boiler feed water pump, and then make sure that the boiler water is maintained at least till just low level, because there's a catch there. There are different levels in the boiler. It starts with the low level, then comes the low level, normal level, high level, high level. So normally there is a default stop or a trip for the high level and the low level. So what I suggest is you start taking the boiler till the low level alarm goes off, or just above the low level. The main reason being, it's only then that you can start firing the boiler. Otherwise, the automation makes sure that the boiler cannot be started even in manual mode. So that's one thing you'll have to make sure of when you start taking water. And again, the vent valve, if it is fitted back, has to be done, and it has to be kept open so that the air starts to get released from the vent as the boiler takes in water. Okay, and then the drain valve has to be shut, because otherwise all the water is going to drain out. Then once you feel that the sufficient level has come inside the boiler, you can probably switch on the breaker and make sure that the automatic mode is on, and you can start the what you call purging. The automatic cycle starts with the FD fan in operation first. Once the FD fan starts, the pre-purging starts. It works for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then of course the fuel oil pump starts to give in the fuel. The pilot burner clicks in, of course the flame is there, and the main burner, the flame eye senses it, gives a signal to the main burner to start. The main burner starts flashing and gives a signal to the flame eye that I am running. Now you can put off the pilot burner. The pilot burner stops, the igniter stops, and the main burner continues to run. Now this is the sequence of operations for the firing in the automatic mode. So I would also insist that you always fire in the auto mode than the manual mode, because normally in the manual mode most of the safeties are being compromised, right? So now this happens to be a cold boiler, so you start firing intermittently, that is in sequence of 1 minute operation firing, stop it for 2 minutes, again fire it for 2 minutes, stop it for 4 minutes. So that's the procedure what you have to do normally to make sure that the heating suddenly does not rise drastically. So assuming that the intermittent firing has been taken place, and it normally takes about 6 to 8 hours for the boiler to build up pressure, sufficient pressure in intermediate firing. And once the required operating pressure has been achieved for that particular boiler, assuming that it is about 6 bar, then you can make sure that the steam stop valve is crack opened, or all the mountings basically are checked whether they are having any leaks or any steam leakage or whatever be. And if everything is fine, you are making sure that you are putting that boiler into operation. So you can also blow through the gauge glass, and also make sure that the gauge glass is also showing the proper level of the water which is there inside the boiler. Alright, so these are the normal procedures which I have not given you in depth detail of the survey, but the kind of what is expected from you, to understand why a survey is needed and what are the general things which are carried out on the boiler. So in course of time I will also tell you in more detail about what are the boiler mountings are, and what is a fire tube boiler, what is a water tube boiler, and all that. Alright, thank you so much.